Hello and welcome to this slightly unusual, slightly isolated talk. Thanks for tuning in. It's great that you've chosen to, or if you've come here by accident, stick around for a few minutes. My name is Daykin. I'm a gay man. I'm a lot of other things as well. I'm a son, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a marketing professional, I'm a traveller, I'm a Eurovision fan, I'm someone's fiance. All of those things, maybe less so the last couple, are independent of me being a gay man, but that's certainly a part of who I am. It's a part of my identity, and it's certainly shaped some of what I want to talk about today. I have a day job. In my day job, I run media, so the advertising that we run at GSK Consumer Healthcare here in the Europe, Middle East and Africa region. If you don't know GSK, it's a big healthcare company, but the bit I work for specifically does consumer brands, so Sensodyne, Panadol, Voltaren, things you might buy in a supermarket or over the counter. And me and my team help make sure that millions, hundreds of millions of people across that region know our brands exist, think about our brands and consider buying us. So that's the day job. The sort of gay job, volunteer bits I do on the side. I'm really passionate about this topic of diversity, this subject of diversity, and that's got me involved in a whole bunch of things. I volunteer at Advertising, which is an organisation representing LGBT people plus people working in marketing. I volunteer for the Conscious Advertising Network, which is an organisation that really looks at where marketers spend their money and how we make sure we don't fund terrible things, ad fraud, hate speech, fake news. I'm a part of the World Federation of Advertisers, a big organisation of global advertisers, and I get involved both in the kind of the serious media, how do we spend our money, how do we make it more effective part, and also I'm one of their co-leads of their diversity and inclusion task force. So there's lots of balls going on up there. But yeah, I'm a gay man. I'm also, I'm white, I'm middle class. Somewhat, straight passing. My friends might disagree. It depends where you meet me, but I have a lot of privilege. A lot of privilege comes from being a white man in society. It's awkward and uncomfortable to say. I'm not super happy or proud about that fact, but it's a reality. And if you don't own that, if you don't take that fact and say, what can I do with it, given that it's easier for me to stand up and shout in meetings than it perhaps is some of my friends, for no good reason, for no fair reason. That's the way it is. I have a lot of privilege, and I try and use some of that privilege to get other people talking and other people doing something different in marketing and advertising about diversity and inclusion and how we represent a whole spectrum of different diversities and minorities, and ultimately why that's a really good idea for everyone, not just sort of a fun box ticking thing to do, but actually a really good idea for your marketing, a really good idea for your people, a really good idea for everyone's sanity. I grew up in an evangelical Christian family. I don't for a minute claim that being a gay man is anywhere near as hard now as it was just a few decades ago, but it certainly brings moments in your life where from quite a young age I was told that a part of me was wrong, was sinful, wasn't right. I certainly didn't see other people around me who I could identify with and recognise as showing some of the feelings and expressions that I was personally starting to feel. I've very supportive, loving family, but they certainly come at this from a very different angle, very different perspective. When I was at school, being gay was still like the number one insult anyone could come up with. It paints a rather sad lack of imagination, but you certainly didn't want to stand out. You certainly didn't want to let anyone know you actually were gay. You had enough target on your back by being a bit awkward, quite geeky, a bit swotty. You didn't need any more target on your back. And I guess that's given me a sort of glimpse into what it's like to not see myself represented in the world around me. And I remember still fairly distinctly one of the first times I ever did start to see myself, and that was a Channel 4 series here in the UK called Queer as Folk. It ran relatively late in the evening, probably too late that I should be watching it, but one of my parents odd decisions was to let me have a TV in my room, and gave me a little gateway into the outside world. And in that show, I saw people a bit like me, quite different to me in many ways, but a bit like me, who were gay, who were going through things I was going through, who were trying to understand that, who were going to spaces that I realised existed, that were safe spaces, that there were other people like me out there. It sounds very sort of sheltered and naive now in this wonderful world of the internet, where you can find this at a tap of a button. But I'm not that old, but when I was growing up, the internet was a very new thing. You didn't have this sort of ubiquitous access to it. You didn't have YouTubers telling their stories, telling them us what it's like. So it was very unusual, very difficult for me, and that really struck me, that show. I learnt a lot from that show. It's an eye-opening show. If you've never watched it, you'll find it big education. But I learned a lot from seeing that, and there's something powerful about the fact that show was made. There's something powerful about the fact like a TV station like Channel 4 is able to show representation. It's been pushing the boundaries for many, many years. Something powerful about the fact that advertisers were still willing to advertise around that show, and I know there were many who probably weren't, but there were some who were. Content only exists when advertisers are willing to appear alongside it. And so for Channel 4 to be able to keep making that show, for it to be able to go on air, advertisers had to say, yeah, I know this is a bit crazy, a bit controversial, but I'm happy to be there. And that representation matters, and to this day it still matters. It's still not easy being a gay kid at school. It's still not easy being a minority in any kind of way. From all ages, for whatever reason, humans have this slightly unfortunate interest in picking on people who are different, on singling them out, on making them feel different, on giving them less attention, on giving them less privilege. So representation really, really matters, and it matters in the kind of the content that's being made, and also in the world I work in the world of advertising. It matters in the adverts we make, and it matters in the content that we fund. Maybe you work in advertising, in which case stick with this, because I think it's really important to you. But if you don't, I still think it's something that matters to us all. We all need to be aware of and thinking about this, because it isn't just a sort of a fun thing to do over there. It really matters. And it can be quite casual, it doesn't have to be a TV series devoted to LGBT people. It doesn't have to be an advert that specifically tells the story. There have been some fantastic adverts. Starbucks did a really great advert in partnership with Mermaids, where they talked about a trans person being misnamed by a lot of people, dead named by a lot of people in their life, and then actually Starbucks is, quirkily enough, one of the places where, if you're lucky, they'll put your right name on a cup. That's a really powerful story. It was very forward focused representation. That's fabulous and wonderful and powerful. But actually sometimes it's quite casual representation. Sometimes it's just making sure that adverts include a wide range of people, of lifestyles, of ages, of genders, of races, of sexualities. And you don't have to do that in a box ticking way, but you have to do that in a way that frankly reflects modern society. It reflects the country you're in. It reflects the consumers that you're trying to appeal to. They do not all look like perfect middle class white families. There are lots of different consumers out there, and it makes your advertising better and more interesting to talk about that, to reflect that. And I think it's a really important time to be talking about this. I know there's a lot going on in the world at the moment. So people have a lot on their plates. A lot of people worried just about their job, about their business, about the next day. It's some of these sort of lofty ambitions, and making the world a better place can be one of the first things we cut out. But it's kind of more important than ever, because there's lots and lots of stats out there, unfortunately, about how minorities and diverse communities are being hit worse by the coronavirus than many others, and many reasons for that. A lot of sort of social demographic wider challenges in society contribute to that. But now is not the time to forget those people. It's not, diversity and inclusion shouldn't just be something that companies and people talk about when things are going really well, when the company's booming and you're looking for that little icing on the cake to sort of get a good ranking somewhere. It's something you need to do throughout, at all times. And it takes time. It takes a long time to do it well. To really transform diversity and inclusion in marketing, we're going to need to transform the look and feel of the people actually working in our industry. We need to get more diverse people in the industry. We need to hear different voices. We can kind of force our content and our output and try and make that more diverse, and we should. But only by actually making our industry and the people in it more diverse will we truly get interesting insights, really be able to understand our consumers, really be able to reflect them back. And that takes a while. It takes a long time. Potentially, it can take a generation. I don't think we should wait a generation. We should be doing stuff about it now. But we need to be planning ahead how we get more people from different backgrounds to start in our industry, how we make sure that they succeed and thrive in our industry. It really matters now more than ever. And this stuff isn't just about, as I've hinted at, it's not just do the right thing, make ourselves feel happy, be able to sleep at night, although all of those are good things. It's a really good thing for business. Again, there's a lot of evidence out there. But not only does this help you reach a different audience, so there are often minority groups who perhaps your traditional media will not very well reach, who perhaps are looking in different spaces, different titles, moving in different spaces, and therefore you're extending your reach. You're making sure you're finding more people. And for those who work in advertising, reach is one of the single most important things. We need people to see us for us to have any impact. But it's more than that. It's to do with relevance and impact. And people can respond to adverts that have people that don't look like them. You don't have to have yourself echoed back in everything you look at. But it is nice to sometimes see adverts that talk to you, that talk to certain aspects of your passion. And for me, that can be being a gay man. It can be that I love the Olympics. There are different ways that advertisers can tap into me and make me feel seen and relevant. But if you're never reflecting consumers, if you're never reflecting their race, their religion, their age, if you're always showing something different, then you're not being relevant to them. So getting in front of more people, being more relevant to more people. And it isn't just the minorities it helps with. There's, again, lots of research that shows that actual more diverse, more inclusive adverts actually appeal more to everyone. Everyone likes them. Everyone likes them. And, I'm a cynic about some of these stats, and there are some reasons behind that. It isn't necessarily that just magically putting diversity in your advert makes it better. Might do, but it's often because more diverse ads are more emotional, they're more considered, they come from brands that have put more effort into this, and there's a whole lot of other things that stack up and make them better. But at the end of the day, if you're being challenged, if you're trying to move in this direction, your business and your brand and your agency and your small company and your own life, there's proof that it's worth it, that it's worth doing. But it isn't always easy because I have a certain aspect of diversity that I'm aware of, but it's very hard for me to really know what it's like, the experience for people with different backgrounds, with different experiences. I try and listen and represent and hear them and support other people, but you also need to hear those voices, have them represented. And so I mentioned at the start a couple of organizations that I'm part of, and this isn't a sales pitch, but I think it's a useful way to bring to life some of the things that we all can do. And one of those is advertising. And advertising in its simplest form, I think, exists to do two things. One, it's about supporting LGBT plus people who work in advertising, and helping them feel supported and welcome and encouraged. And the other one is helping the output of the industry to make sure that it is representative, that it does tell LGBT plus stories, that it does feature LGBT plus people. And I think both of those are really interesting things. The first one, advertising is a very metrosexual, dynamic industry. It's often based in large capital cities, which are by definition more diverse, tend to be more inclusive. In the grand scheme of jobs and spaces, it's a safer space than many, but it's far, far, far from perfect. As a gay man, as anything, there's this term of covering, where you have to cover up who you are, and you feel that you have to hide some part of your personality. Maybe you're quite camp or over the top, and you feel that's inappropriate. You won't be taken seriously if people know that. Or it's small things. Every time I have a Skype call, and people are asking you what you did at the weekend, there's a kind of a conscious choice of saying, I did things with my boyfriend, I did things with my partner. He's my fiance these days, which is actually makes it you have to be quite deliberate to mention his gender. And that's a choice you make. And it's a choice that sometimes, even myself as quite a confident out person, I will swerve because you're on an international call, you don't know the background of the person you're talking to. Maybe they work in a country where LGBT rights are at a different stage, where acceptance is different. You just don't want it to be a thing. But it means you're having to think about that, and rather than just being honest and being yourself and being able to go about your job in the best way possible, you're trying to cover up for that and make yourself seem more normal. I think that's a challenging thing. We should encourage people not to do that, and one way to do that is, as senior leaders, to be open and honest and talk about this stuff. But it's not just about the people whose responsibilities, it's the listeners. We have to accept that stuff, and diversity comes in many different forms. I think one of the fantastic things about being stuck in our homes and on web cameras has been seeing kids and the real challenges that people face. Being a single mother and having to look after the kids whilst on conference calls. That's a really interesting and important part of some of my colleagues' lives, and I want to support that. I don't think that they should have to cover that up. They shouldn't have to say, "Oh no, I'm definitely working." They can say, "I'm leaving the office at 3 o'clock because I have to go and pick my kid up, and I'm still doing my job. I'll get it done. I'll work later. I'll come in earlier. I'm being flexible." But we shouldn't make people cover up who they are. We should encourage them to be who they are, because that's a lot of the richness and the diversity they bring to our businesses. We don't want everyone to be a sort of carbon copy of each other. We want those different perspectives. And in terms of what we produce, and we've talked about this a lot, that representation matters, that it's important to show people of different minorities, to tell their stories, and from an LGBT perspective in particular, advertising tries to support brands doing that. Because the truth is that can be hard to get right. And brands can be guilty of not doing it at all, of ignoring that audience. They can also be guilty, often accused of what you might call pink washing, of slamming a Rainbow Pride logo on their Facebook page, or doing a sort of a one-off campaign or poster or story, but actually not really being there for that community, not actually doing the things that matter. And there's a balance to get right, because often if you launch a campaign that's deliberately inclusive or representative, you can get a backlash from all directions. You can get people from that community telling you they don't like it, and you can get people who are against that community, unfortunately, telling you don't like it. And advertising, we try and support people to walk that path. And for me, I think it is important that brands that make a bold step in this space are backing it up with action. They have internal policies that represent those communities that they're talking about. But I also don't think that being a gay man makes me a charity case, and I don't think any minority is a charity case. And I'm happy for brands to want to talk to me and want to represent me. And in the same way that brands might target housewives with kids, they don't have to support a housewife with kids charity to be able to sell to a housewife with kid. They can just create great advertising and talk to that person. But you wouldn't expect them to have work policies that make a housewife struggle if they work for their company. It's finding that balance. The Conscious Advertising Network, another organisation I mentioned, which is really about the fact that where we spend our money matters. Advertising is ultimately the fuel for the internet, the fuel for TV, the fuel for most content. Obviously some of us pay for Netflix and things, but a lot of content is funded by advertising, and therefore what content exists is to a fair extent controlled by advertising. Of course, there's editorial and people do what they want to do, but advertisers can choose whether they appear alongside it or not. And that means we can choose whether adverts fund high quality journalism, local news, diverse media titles, reporting on and speaking to diverse communities, or whether we just sort of throw it out there and hope for the best and accidentally end up funding hate speech, fake news, adverts through what we call programmatic media, where it's bought by computers, can appear almost anywhere, and advertisers, if they're not very careful, can find themselves funding stuff that they probably don't want to. And it doesn't even have to be bad. It can be, celebrity plastic surgery slideshows that you have to click through. It's not hurting anyone necessarily, but it's pretty crappy content. And do we really want to be funding that and fueling that at a time when journalism, when diverse media titles are frankly struggling to get the money they need to really stay alive and stay strong? And so that's a choice we make. And there are many different things advertisers can do, but to do with what we would call brand safety settings, to do with actively choosing to target certain channels, working with partners like Brand Advance, who runs a network, who works with these kind of partners. It's a really good way of starting. And the last one, and one of the things I represent is the World Federation of Advertisers, and we're just launching a new diversity and inclusion task force, and I'm really proud to be part of that. I'm really proud to see the WFA stepping up to represent and sponsor and be featured in this space. We're trying not to reinvent the wheel. We're trying to celebrate stuff that's already good, already happening, already out there, trying to amplify different initiatives, bring it together, bring some like-minded global people together, and try and move a bit past just talking about stuff to doing it. And one thing we've done is we've just launched a diversity and inclusion guide. It talks a bit about how, in much more detail, if you work in a big advertising marketing business, you can start tackling this. And it starts right through from your people through to your creative. It's got some really great case studies from much wiser marketing leaders than myself. And it concludes on 5 points, which I think are a fair conclusion for what we're talking about today. The first one is around on focus, and you have to make this a focus and a priority. It won't kind of happen if you just leave it to the side. It can be helpful to focus on certain aspects of diversity to really get them right, but don't make that an excuse to say, I'm dealing with gender equality 3 years from now. Everything has to move forwards at the same time. Focus on your people. Make sure your HR processes are good. Make sure you're looking for the right people, that you've got inclusive ways of bringing people into your company, and then pay real attention that those people, when they make it into your company, they have networks, they have support, they feel that they can proceed, that they don't feel that for whatever diversity or uniqueness they might bring, whether it's neural or economic or anything, that they feel well supported. Think a lot about your content. I mean, your content as a marketer and advertiser is the biggest thing we show externally. It's how we show up to consumers and people in the real world. So every single piece of content cannot represent every single piece of diversity in the world. Don't try and do that. But if you look at everything you're making over the course of a year, and it all shows kind of yummy mummies doing yoga with their middle class white friends, maybe there could be some diversity that comes into that. And if you don't know how to do that and you feel nervous, there are partners and agencies and people out there who can help you. Think about your media. Where we spend our money matters. Where we spend our money funds the internet. So yes, do that brand safety stuff we talked about, but do it carefully, because there are horror stories of brands who, trying to avoid this bad stuff, put very generic terms, lesbian, Muslim, on these lists of words that they won't appear alongside. At the moment, COVID, if you put some of these words on your block list, then large parts of the internet are suddenly unavailable to you. And of course, advertisers have to be careful of what they appear next to, but we need to still be part of society, part of culture. And every piece of content written around Muslim people, or every single piece of content written around lesbian women, is not something that needs to be avoided. There's some fantastic stories, and we want those positive stories to be told. Make sure your adverts can be there. Deliberately chase those opportunities where you can. And the 5th point is it all to do with your attitude and your personal attitude. It's a simple ask, and it's be a decent human being. Whether you make yourself a big diversity ambassador and talk and tweet and shout about this stuff, or whether you just do your normal job as per normal, one way or another, you're going to encounter moments in your life where diversity is a part of the situation you're in, where those around you need allies, need support, need encouragement, need you to help and support them. And you may well want that yourself one day. So let's be decent people, look out for those around us, and work in an industry that not only feels good internally to work in, but that makes output that actually makes society around us better, makes our brands do better. Because diversity and inclusion isn't just a fun thing to do. It's a really important part of marketing and representation. And if you dig deep into brand planning and strategy, it's about reflecting your consumers and appealing to them. And it's about talking to me and selling to me, and being relevant to a gay man or 7 billion other people. So thanks for tuning in. I hope that was interesting, a bit rambling, but I hope it's challenged you, made you think a bit differently, maybe make you go and Google and look up a few things afterwards. Lots of great materials out there, or find me, Jerry Daykin, on Twitter, LinkedIn, anywhere, any good social network, and happy to chat about it. Stay safe and stay sane.